Yeah, pleasure to sit down with you and to learn more about your golf career, I guess. How did it start for you? Was it all right here at the Riverside, Ms. Danahar, or how did you get into golf?
Well, when I was very small, my dad used to play at different courses. You were allowed to come on, and he worked on the CNR, and he made the rack to hold up golf bags at the City Club. It was still there, and Mr. Kinnear was the pro there, and he gave my dad, instead of paying him, to have a few games at the City Club. He also played at the Wildwood Golf Course, and I'd go with him and his friend, and there was one tee I used to like because when you hit your ball, a lot of the tees would end up in a little bush behind. I would pick them up. And then as I grew up, I loved to ride my bike, and my girlfriend and I were always making sports days in the neighborhood, and we were playing softball and all the sports that in empty lots at that time. And then when I got into public school, I played softball and was a pitcher, and that was about all I had. But broomball and skating, we had at our home. We had a rink in our backyard. My dad made every year, and I just liked the outdoors, and I just liked sport. And when I got into high school, I started playing basketball and played on the senior team and played volleyball. And when I was in my 12th year, just in May, the principal there, Mr. McGregor, came up to me in the hallway, and I was worried because they were having a half hour every Wednesday to talk about certain things, and this one was about joining the Army. And I thought, I'm never going to join the Army. So I went up to my locker, and I thought I'd put all of my stuff away and go home. So I felt this hand on my shoulder, and I thought, oh, I'm in trouble. And it was Mr. McGregor, and he looked at me, and I said, oh, I'm really not interested in joining the Army. He said, oh, I'm not here about that. He said, well, how would you like to work in the office here? One of our secretaries is leaving. So I was in the vice principal's office, and then I became the head secretary in the principal's office about a year after that, when Mr. McGregor retired and we got a new principal.
Okay.
And so my dad and I would go over the 9-hole course at the City Club. Now, I'm right-handed, but I golfed left-handed. And in those days, it was difficult to get clubs, so I'd be playing with a men's set, and I was shooting 42 on this little 9, and I quite liked the game. And so my dad said, well, he said, I'll take you out to Bill Turnbull. I know him from the CNR because he was a machinist like me, and we knew each other, and I knew his dad, who was my helper. So he drove me out here, and I had the summer. I used to get about a month and a half off in the summer from the school, and he drove me out, and I had this month, and I came out and had some lessons, and then I would kind of hang around and kind of soak up the golf. Mm-hmm. And then in 1953 I got a share, and I joined the club, and that's how I got really involved. And then the very first year, in 1956, we married, Bill and I, and we went on our honeymoon to the United States. And we were able to play Cypress Point, which you can't get on, and Pebble Beach, wow, and the top course in San Francisco. And we played at the other famous golf club. They've had a couple of ladies tournaments there and men's, Pinehurst.
Okay, yes, yeah.
Yeah, so as we went through the United States, we played at all of these courses. And then when I came back, the first year I played in the city championship in 1957. It was at the City Club. And when I got up, it was pouring rain. So I said to Bill, I guess there won't be playing. He says, yes. You see, he says, you've got to go out there. They'll play in the rain. Yeah. So I went out there, and I had never played the course. And what he had said to me was, just kind of look at the whole length by what you play at Riverside. And so I did. And it was funny, Mrs. Phillips and Mrs. Riddle, who were kind of established players at this city club, and Mrs. Phillips whacked one down the first hole. I couldn't believe it, how far it went. So then when we got the second hole, it was about 130 yards, and I just had a driver, a 3-wood. I didn't have, at that time, a 4-wood. And she stood up with this wood and hit onto the green. I thought, well, I guess I need my 3-wood. So I hit my 3-wood and ended up on the second tee. And she says, turned to me and says, oh my dear, what did you hit? I said, well, I hit my 3-wood. She said, oh dear. She said, I just hit my 9-wood. And I never heard of the 9-wood. And it was really quite funny. And I think I got to the quarterfinals. And the next year I'd won. But talking about learning, Bill said, well, you haven't played too much golf left hand. We'll change you to right hand because it's difficult to get left-handed clubs.
Yeah, back in that day for sure.
Yeah, and so I ended up having a set of men's clubs. And I'd come out to practice, and I had to think about how to put my hands on the club because I naturally wanted to play left-handed. And this fairway out here, it was full of tumbleweed, and what you had to do is bring your own balls and you put your initials on them. But the problem was, if there's more than one person hitting, you had to wait till the other person finished before you could go and pick up your balls. And I remember being out here hitting balls late in the evening, and coyotes would be up in the hill across. There were no houses there. You could hear them, and you could play pretty well, go out in the golf course during the week because the men didn't come out to golf only on Wednesdays and the weekend because most of them were working.
Yeah.
So that was how I started my golf. And I became kind of hooked with competition, and my husband said, well, you know, it can be kind of, you know, rough. And I you know, was kind of stunned, and I kind of learned after what it was like. So I really enjoyed it. And then the first tournament I ever won was here at 1958, and I beat Mrs. Phillips' daughter, and that was my first win as an amateur.
What was it about the game that you did really like? Was it strictly the competition, or did you still like to come out and play recreational with all your friends?
I loved playing with people. I used to go out with some of the men. My husband would say, there was a group of fellows that came out one day and their fourth wasn't there, and they said, oh, you know, we like to gamble, and I used to, you know, I did too. And so he said, well, do you mind, Barbara will go with you? And they say, sure. They were like, so I played with them, and this one guy, he was out in the rough, and Riverside was more like a links course because it was designed by Mr. Kinnear. Mm-hmm. There were no holes on the other side of the road. The greens were very small. The fairways were, of course, as you see, as the land lay. So your short game became very good here. Yeah. Because of conditions. There were no sand bunkers, so you know you had to have different shots, and that's why I was always pleased. And the lies were always downhill, uphill, side hill. So you learn to hit all these various kinds of shots. And this one fellow was out in the rough, and he was in between two clumps. And so I'm standing beside him, and he's got his arm there, and I'm watching him. And my husband said, watch him, because they do tend to cheat a bit. So I stood beside him, and he says, I don't know whether I could get my wood out there or my iron. And I said, he had his toe behind the ball. I said, if you leave the ball there, I'd hit an iron. And it was kind of funny. And then I remember I was down in the locker room, and you could hear the men through our vents. Yeah. And before we came up to have a drink, the winners always bought. Of course. And so I had to go upstairs and chip in with the drinks. And this one fellow said, well, what did you think of playing with Barbara? He says, oh, she's got pretty good legs. So when I came up here, I said, so you like my legs, and they kind of went like this, and it was really quite funny because I didn't tell them. We could hear everything from the men's locker room. But at those time, there was on Ladies' Day here, you'd have about 76 women, and we used to have 4 pots where you dropped your little ticket in to say that you were in this flight, that flight, and then we'd take turns. I was on the ladies' sports committee, and we'd make the draw. We'd have people going off the 9th and the 12th and the first hole to try and get them all off.
Yeah.
But you'd have to really wait for a long time to have everybody come in. And we also had what they call a field day, and that's when you dressed up. And I've got some pictures of them, women all dressed up, and we go out and we'd have a long drive and a chipping and putting and 9 holes of golf. And you know, we'd invite the city ladies over, and they had a big club. We'd have over 200 playing that day on our day. Tuesday was a real ladies' day. I mean, the men didn't show up because there were so many of us out here.
So there used to be a really big, like your group, your generation, women's golf was a really big thing.
Yes, it was.
And you guys were very good players.
Yeah. Well, most of us were, you know, like we were married, and some, like Jerry had a family. Joanne wasn't working at that time, but what had made me get involved is that I went to watch Jerry and Joanne and a couple of other women play at the city club, you know, they were just playing, you know, to show what ladies golf was. And my dad drove me out, and I sat in the car and watched them play on the 11th hole at the city club. And I thought, yo, this is fun, you know, I'd like to get involved somehow.
For sure.
That was kind of, I wanted to play. My dad said to me, I said, I want to play a sport. Well, he said, play golf. You can play that till you're an old lady.
And we're going to talk, because it sounds like you're going to get back out there from speaking to your husband. He said you're going to get back out there next summer, hopefully, after, you know, some health stuff. But let's talk about some of your career highlights. And, you know, I've seen some pictures. I can't wait to go through that box. But you know, you've traveled internationally playing this game, representing Riverside and Saskatchewan, and you've done it well. Yeah.
Well, I think my first time was getting on the Saskatchewan golf team, and they held one at the city club, and I'm not quite sure the date, but in the final qualifying round, the wind, you couldn't believe it. I mean, you could hardly stand up. And on their second hole, people were hitting 3 woods, and the wind was blowing them back. That's how strong. In those days, you know, the ball was a bladder, and you know, you didn't have a big choice of woods.
Right.
Yeah. So they were hitting 3 woods, and a couple of Ontario women were playing in front of me, and they were killing themselves laughing because the ball was coming back at them with the wind. And I made the cut. I think I shot 892 or something, and the best score was 85. And the playoff, there was 27 women went down the first hole to pick 3 or 4 people to make the top draw. And I remember that. And I also remember I had got an infection in my finger, and my husband had arranged for a doctor to come at the 9th hole to give me a shot every round because the pain was so bad in my hand. And that was kind of things I remembered from those years.
Is there a point where you thought of, like, I am going to get to go see and experience a lot of things with the help of golf, whether it's traveling to national tournaments across the country, or, you know, as mentioned, heading over to Madrid and playing in Australia, unbelievable experiences for you.
Well, also too, in outside when we had our honeymoon in the States, my dad and mother were going to England, and I went with them. They picked me up in Ottawa after the national, and I went with them, and we were able to play St. Andrews, and that was such a thrill because there was an elderly man who he was a caddy, but we didn't have a caddy. We were carrying our clubs, and we had to rent them. And in those days, at a couple of the outstanding clubs that we went to, they allowed my dad into the clubhouse, but they didn't allow me. So I had to change my shoes in the car, and And I said to my dad, well, I'm being kicked out of better places than this. Because some of the clubhouses were, not what you were used to in Canada. And we played, he followed us around, this elderly man. He kept telling me where to hit it. And we played St. Andrews for $7 in those days. And it's changed since the Americans decided to go over there. And then another time, my husband now, Dan, and I played St. David's. Now, St. David's is one of the top courses, but the reason you can't have a British Open on St. David's is because there's not enough accommodation. So they never play there, but it's... Dan, we were on the first tee, and he says, where do you hit? I said, you see that little bit of green down there? That's the fairway. And then what happens over there is that you hit the ball, and your ball disappears, and it's in a bunker that you didn't know was there. And I really, really enjoyed it. I just love links golf, and that's why I always look forward to the British Open, and I always look forward to the United States and Europe playing. And I always cheer for the Europeans because I just love their golf and their attitude towards it. They seem to enjoy it more.
Yeah. When you look back on your own career, what stands out for you? And I mean, is it the camaraderie, the people? Is it certain events? Do you have a lot of time to reminisce now a little bit?
Yes.
Just memories flood back every time you come to this, beautiful facility.
Yes. Well, the thing it's given me is that I traveled. In fact, every time we golfed or went away on a vacation after we were married and we had a business, we would go to Portugal and join a group, and they would have a competition. We played in Spain, and we played in Germany, up in the mountains, and we played in the United States and different places. So through golf, going to Australia, Spain, and the British Isles, it was always part of our holidays, and meeting people. And we once were on a golf course in Spain, and this man they had him join up with us, and he started talking. He said, when I was a child, I had a movie camera, and I kind of went, a movie camera in those days, you must have money. So I kind of saddled over towards his bag and picked his tag up, and his name was, he was the head of the sugar company, and one in he says, you're from Canada, then you must know the sugar country in Montreal. And I said yes, and we realized who he was, and Dan would know his first name, but I've forgotten. Then we were playing in Germany, and we were staying at this hotel, and the man was part owner of the club, and he would drive us out, but he said, I'd like you to play. Do you mind playing with this lady? And I said, no, not at all. So she came along, and her husband was a diplomat, and they asked us where we're going next, and I said, we're going to Vienna. And so they said, where are you staying? We were staying in kind of one of the hotels, so it was expensive. And when we got there, she phoned up and said, we have a place for you to stay. We have an extra apartment. And then she took us to see the Lipizan horses, and we sat in the best box there was and watched the horses practicing. So all of these things are memories.
Mm-hmm. The golf helped bring them, for sure.
Yeah.
We just announced another Hall of Fame class here yesterday, and in 2010, you got to go into the Golf Sask Hall of Fame with some of your friends around a couple of years there. What does that mean to you to be enshrined and just recognized among the greatest Saskatchewan golfers ever?
Oh, well, it's an honor. I don't think of it that way. I mean, I was put into the first Saskatchewan Sports Hall of Fame, and it's just that golf has given me a lot of good memories.
How come you're still in Saskatoon?
Well,
we look around here and there's so much snow and it's cold and
well, number one, I was born here. My dad immigrated from England, and my mother immigrated to Winnipeg, and they met in Winnipeg. My dad was training to be a machinist,
Mhm.
and I was born here, so that was another good reason to stay. And I mean, I just love it here. I love to be able to look out for a long way. I don't think I could live in the mountains, but it was a matter of money. You know, you had to have extra money to go to the United States, which we didn't have. So, you know, it was staying here and disc golfing in the summertime.
For sure, and I understand that you are going to try and get back out there next year and play. Did you just talking to Pat and how you've been doing?
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it. I spent 7 months in hospital, and all the while I was in there, I kind of missed, and some of the ladies I golfed with came to see me, and especially the young ones, because they, you know, I remember them as juniors, and pleased to see them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one last thing, you're very vocal and you're big, almost a pioneer, but women's golf, it means a lot to you. I could tell just talking beforehand.
Yes.
And just, there's a lot of things that you know, want to say about it for a little
Yeah,
bit.
well, you know, I remember at our club was Marnie McMillan was one of the original, after they opened up the club after the war, and she was the course rating chairman for Saskatchewan, and they had two, one in the south and one in the north, just one person. And so she invited me to go out with her, and then through her I learned, you know, how to course rate. We had a little booklet, so I was doing it all by myself out in the country, and we'd go to the small little 9-hole courses, and I'd walk up to a certain distance and look in, and this woman said, well, none of us can hit the ball there. But I said, no. I tried to explain it was the scratch golfer you were laying out the handicap for on your golf course. And Marnie then became national chairman, and she wrote the book for course rating for Canada. Nice. After that, Mrs. Mackenzie, who's played at our course, she became the national president. So in 1967, which was our centennial year, we had the national tournament here. That was the year that our team tied with British Columbia, and they didn't have a system to break a tie, so they kind of had one, and we didn't end up, they didn't give it to both of us, they just made them, and we were runners up. And they also had the Commonwealth teams came here to play. They were playing, I forget if it was in Canada, and they all came, like we had the British and Australians and, you know, so on, played here. And I played against a couple of their top players, and I got to maybe the 8s and lost out, but it was a thrill to play with, you know, such good golfers from the Commonwealth.
Absolutely. I know the number of junior girl golfers especially isn't high, but we have some very good ones that are coming up. What's the message that you would like to, you know, they're a little bit younger and they probably wouldn't know of you or seen you play, obviously, but what would be the message you want to pass on to them if they, you know, if they really want to continue to, you know, to develop and just experience maybe some things that you got to?
Well, as far as practicing, my husband said, don't spend so much time hitting long shots. Spend a lot of time with your short game, and that's what I did. I'd concentrate on my short game, and we didn't have bunkers here at Riverside, but behind the pro shop was a lot of sand. So I used to go there and practice out of this. It wasn't real coarse sand, it was just sand, like prairie sand, and I'd practice out of that. That was the only way I could get the feeling. But the City Club had a lot of bunkers, and that was one of my favorite courses because the greens were small. You didn't get my husband, he came from playing at the City Club. He was a scratch golfer there, and he said, when you play, don't get to the sides of the greens. If you play short and you can chip up, and he always pushed that, don't get to the sides of the greens. It's more difficult to get close to the hole. So that was always kind of, you know, my mantra when I played there. But that was one of my favorite courses because I thought it was, you know, it was a good test of golf.
Yeah. Is there anything else you just want to add that I didn't lead you into?
Oh, I just like to see more women, young women playing golf, and I'd like to see them develop more juniors, even at the club level. I think that golf is not promoting players like they used to. I mean, I got a telegram when I was in the finals with Marlene Street that was really long from everybody in Saskatoon. So in those days, everybody was kind of, into how your players did, and and then I remember having the men's national here and following it, and like Gary Cowan and people like that. And when we were in Spain, the men's team were there at the same time, and we went out. They invited us out for a meal. So we all said, well, we got to pay our share. So we're sitting at the table, and Gary Cowan's here, and in came the president of the Men's Golf Association, and he had false teeth, and he's talking to him, and Gary says, well, I hope you're all enjoying yourself. Well, Gary says, yes, we are, because you're paying for it. Well, his teeth dropped. We didn't know. We just sat there. This is the ladies' team, because after he left, we were in hysterics, because, we didn't realize that we were being paid for by the Men's Association to go out for dinner. It was really funny.
See, the way you're lighting up right there telling that story, I can imagine it's stories like that you remember more than any stories you posted, right?
Yeah, and then, seeing all the different courses in Canada and seeing our country. Mm-hmm. And I remember being in Spain, and we were sitting in the clubhouse. There was a hill that was very steep at this golf course, and there were, I would say, 20 women on their hands and knees crawling up this course, pulling weeds and putting them in the basket. That's how manicured this golf course was.
Oh, that's good. We're, from our association, congratulations on everything that you've done and your success. And it's glad you could sit down with us today and immortalize your story here with the power of video. And we really hope to see you back out here next summer playing the game you love.
Thank you.